Power Producers Shop Talk, where we are refining and redefining the sales game by equipping you with the tools you need to differentiate yourself in the marketplace.
Listening to the podcast is only going to get you so far. Why not take your game to the next level? Check out Power Producer Basecamp on killingcommercial.com today.
Tactical skills that'll help you provide deliverable value to your clients and prospects.
Want to have the sweet swag that we send out from the Power Producers podcast for your clients and employees? Check out policyt.com today.
And action items that you can provide to take your prospects and clients to the next level.
Want to create an online presence but don't know how to start? Check out crushingcontent.com. It's done for you, so all you have to do is show up.
This is Power Producers Shop Talk, production redefined. Are you ready to feel the power?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Power Producers Shop Talk. And this one is going to be a little bit more personal, a little bit more hopefully impactful, but if nothing else, certainly eye-opening. And I've got a great guest with us today. I normally do Shop Talk solo, but I need to bring Raghav Tana on to sort of talk about what he's doing, but also really to give anybody out there a vote of confidence or maybe just an encouraging word if you feel like life is stacked against you and you don't know how you're going to deal with it. And so before we get too far into it, I wanted to bring Raghav on and let him talk, just really, really quickly introduce himself. And then I want him to talk about the Little Sparks project that he has started along with their gala that's coming up here in December. It's something that I have not been as involved in on a mechanical side as what my wife has been. And the reason why is because she is far more valuable to Raghav than what I am in her role in capacity professionally. And we'll get into that. I mean, we both agreed before we started recording that we had obviously married up, as most of our friends have. But it's something I know that she has gotten involved in personally and with her company. And I just really feel like this is a great opportunity for some of you out there in the insurance industry that maybe have been looking to get plugged into something that you can support and get behind, and maybe you haven't, to jump on board and get involved with Little Sparks. But also, like I said, to understand that if you're in a situation like the constituency of the people from Little Sparks Project, that there's a place you can turn to, and if nothing else, have a sounding board or hear the stories of two people who have experienced some mild level of success in the insurance industry, even though things aren't necessarily the way we expected them to be with the hands that we've been dealt, and how we navigate around that stuff and deal with it, because it's a real thing. And I think that a lot of times we feel like when things don't work out the way we want them to, or when we're given a unique situation, that we feel like we're the only ones who are there. And that's not good. It's not good for your mental health, for sure. But so I'm going to tell you my story today, a lot more than what you're probably used to hearing. But before I do that, Raghav, tell them a little bit about, sort of last time we had you on, it was pre-applied, and, Tarmika was still kind of getting kicked up and up and running. But give them a little bit about your background, and then let's get into the Little Sparks thing and talk about that. I think it's really important for us to get the message out.
No, I appreciate it. So most of my conversations with David until recently, and on this podcast 2.5 years ago, were about the commercial lines rating platform that I built with my team called Tarmika. Ultimately, in 2022, we were acquired by Applied. It was all professional. It was all about the things that we do for insurance agencies and insurance carriers and how we benefit them. And over the last couple of years, things have changed quite a bit. Now I'm at Applied. We've sold our company and working on some bigger, better, different things, and really excited about that. But it's for 2 years, for 4 years prior to getting acquired by Applied, the only thing I ever talked about on podcasts was commercial rating and insurance agencies and how quickly times change. But this is arguably a more exciting, more personal topic and something that I care way more about.
Absolutely. So talk about Little Sparks. What I understand what motivated you to get there, and we'll get into that, but rather than making everybody guess kind of what we're talking about, give them the layout of what Little Sparks is, what it does, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so there's a story behind this, which I'll share as well. The Little Sparks Project is aimed to help families financially that have children with medical complexities, and that could range from a whole gamut of things. It could be a super rare disease. It could be medical complications that require them to stay in the hospital. Any excess care that they need for children under the age of 12. And there's a lot of emotional toll that comes with something like that, but there's also the financial burden that comes along with having a child with medical complexities. And so I recently posted about this because the background of Little Sparks Project is actually started because of my son. My second child was born with something called Apert syndrome, which if you haven't heard of it, most people haven't. It's about 1 in 100,000 children are born with it. And it causes your bones to fuse early is the easiest way to put it. So your fingers are fused, your toes are fused, your skull bones fuse early, create some complications in the shoulders and in other parts of the body. But it requires you to have, he's had 6 surgeries in his first year and 2 months of life. He's going to have countless more over the next couple of years. And like I said at the beginning of this conversation, the emotional burden of not knowing that you're going to have a child that's born with medical complexities, which we didn't know until the day he was born, is enough weight to crush a person. I couldn't imagine the financial burden that a lot of families face when they're going through something like this. And fortunately, my wife and I were lucky that we had sold Tarmika in 22. Brooks was born in 2023. So I guess things do work out. And I couldn't imagine him any different way now that he's here. But the Little Sparks Project was aimed to allow people to cope with their emotional burden in their own time and not have to worry about the financial element of it.
So we have something in common. We've got probably more than one thing in common, but something you just said, I think is really important. And that is, you had no idea what your future was going to look like until your son was born. We are very similar in that regard, with the one exception being we still didn't know that there were issues with Ethan even when he was born. It was probably, I don't know, man, maybe somewhere in the 6-month range, 6 to 9 months, we started noticing, and I say we very, very loosely. I want to be clear and give you guys the Captain Crunch decoder ring to this. When I say we, I mean my wife specifically. But she started noticing stuff that wasn't quite there. And, by way of background, Andrea is a speech pathologist by education, or speech therapist rather, but she works for an augmentative communication company who creates speech devices for people who have the cognitive ability to speak but are nonverbal for any number of reasons. It could be ALS, it could be stroke, it could be autism. And so she's worked with people with special needs for pretty much her entire adult life. So in our situation, she was immediately like picking up on things that I never even would have noticed or seen, because a lot of what Ethan deals with it's not visible. It doesn't mean it's any less difficult to deal with, but it's just like, if I were to bring him into your house, 10 minutes, you wouldn't know anything was, left to center with him. If he was there for 20, you'd be ready to hand him back. But it was a slow reveal for us. And so, I remember what it was like, but I feel like it was really, really excruciating, because we had, number one, we didn't know anything was, I hate to say wrong, but anything wasn't per spec, for lack of a better term. And number two, like, what was the scope of that? How far was this thing going to go? And then it was spread out over a long period of time. So, you know, to give people a little bit of background, if you follow me on social, specifically Facebook, like we post a lot. We're very open about the fact that we have a child with special needs. We embrace it. We're advocates for it. If you've ever gone to an IEP meeting at a school and sit through that, you realize pretty quickly that you're in the minority. There are so many kids out there who don't have advocates for them, that don't have people that are going to fight for them to get them what they need in terms of resources and everything else. And I'll never forget, Ethan being, about a year and a half old, and Annie just saying, we need to start the process now, because if we don't start now, he's not going to get the resources he needs when it's time for him to go into the school system. And I think there are a lot of people who, based on my conversations anyhow, who think that the answer is, well, we'll just put them in private school. That's probably the absolute worst thing you can do for a child who has special needs, because private schooling does not have the resources or the funding necessary to give those kids the resources that they need. Regardless of what the parental opinion is, that's a fact. That's what the numbers say. And I think that a lot of times we allow our own ego or lack of willingness to admit that, hey, maybe my kid needs a little bit more than what they're getting, and just accepting that, embracing it because we're ashamed of it for whatever reason, puts kids into a spiral where they're going to end up turning into adults that never got supported when they were growing up at the way they should. And so, I've always made it a point to be present for all of those things. If not, even if I don't say anything, just the fact that I'm there to support him puts Ethan ahead of so many other kids. And I feel horrible that I see kids that need advocates every day. And you know what? When my insurance career is over, there's a high likelihood that one day, we end up doing something very similar where we advocate. But Annie knew that because of her job. She knew it because she worked in the school system, and she knew that in order for us to get the resources we needed for him to do as well as he possibly could, that we needed to have a diagnosis in order to have that happen. And Ethan was born with low white brain matter, which is something that is formed prenatally, and you don't get any more. You either have what you have for life, or you have progressive white brain disease, which means your white brain matter goes away and it's 100% fatal. He has an agenesis of his corpus callosum, which means part of his brain is missing in layman's terms. And that part of his brain is the superconductor between the left and right hemispheres, which means he can short circuit at any given time. He has a very difficult time with logic and reason. But then there's other crazy things that he's an absolute genius at, which is kind of cool to watch and see him operate that way. He has autism. He has probably some level of Tourette's. And if he doesn't, he needs to be a trucker when he grows up, because his mouth can get out of control crazy. But it all goes back to the fact he can't process in his brain the way he's supposed to. And it's just one thing after the other. And these things started lining up. And what really led us to go down this road was he was having a difficult time keeping his food down. And so he would eat, and then you would see the face, as Annie would call it, and then boom, projectile vomiting everywhere. And so we took him in to a local doctor that's a huge gastro for pediatrics, very well-known, national reputation. And she brought him into the hospital to have testing on a Friday. I mean, I will never forget this, and I don't think any of us would. But she brought us in for testing on a Friday, and he went in and he had his endoscopy, and the doctor came out and said, everything with the scope is clear, but we have every pediatric specialist here this weekend. We would really like to admit Ethan and do all the testing we can to see what we can figure out. As long as we're here, would you have a problem with us admitting him? And I'm like, we literally showed up for like a relatively routine procedure that was going to be an hour, and now we're admitting our son to the hospital. Obviously, yes, if that's what you think is the best thing to do, let's do it. And so Annie stayed behind, and I went to the car and came out to where we live, about 45 minutes from the hospital, to pack weekend bags and make arrangements for Grayson and Landon at the time, who were still very young themselves. And I drove back into the hospital, and as I did, I'll never forget this, man. I'm retracing my steps, and I realize I'm pulling into the pediatric cancer unit, and I don't know why. Like, why am I here? Why isn't, and so a million things are running through your mind at that point. And so we were there for the weekend, and a bunch of testing and everything was done. And they came back, and they noted some things, but they didn't pick up on the corpus callosum, and they didn't pick up on the low white brain matter. And so we had to go to a follow up at another pediatric neurologist. And this guy, I'm not allowed to go to appointments at this doctor because he has a horrible bedside manner. And the way he talked to my wife almost got him a quick invitation to counting ceiling tiles, from his back on the floor. So I don't go to those appointments anymore for that reason. But he basically just said, look, you've got this and this, and I can't believe somebody else missed this. And we're stuck, man. Boston's where you're living has really good medical systems and hospitals and things. I don't purport to know everything about it, but I know that there's good reputation and there's a lot of resources up there. We don't have that down here because the climate for medical malpractice in Florida is terrible. We're a 3 strikes and you're out state. So we're never going to get the best doctors in the trauma units. We're never going to get the best specialists, because if they miss and somebody sues them, boom, 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 3 times, you lose your license and you're not practicing in Florida. So, because of that, we don't always get the best talent. So we were in a position, and I promise you, I'm going somewhere, people, with this story. We were in a position where we had to seek that out, and where we sought help was Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which is the absolute #1 pediatric neurology hospital in the country. So we went from an environment where we had 3 or 4 pediatric neurologists in the entire Tampa Bay area to going to a place where they had like 55 of them, and every single one of them had a specialty. And there was somebody who could drill down on exactly what Ethan had. But, the hardest part of all of this for us was the fact that in order to understand exactly what his outlook was going to be, there's no way to rush that. You have to wait. So at 18 months, they took an MRI to measure his low white brain matter. And then for the next 18 months, we lived without knowing whether or not our son was going to live to see 10 years old or not. Now, if you think building an agency is difficult, if you think going out and producing is difficult, try doing that when you're dealing with all of this other stuff. And I will never complain about having a child who has special needs as being a burden to me, because he's not. But the mental space that you live in when those things happen could be really detrimental to you if you don't have the ability to power through it. And it's still not easy at that point. And to take it a step further, what we found was that it's highly likely that the reason that he ended up having those two deficiencies specifically, because kind of everything else that he has is a diagnosis, stems from those couple of things, was because Annie was sick with a virus when she was pregnant, and it got passed through the umbilical cord, and it affected Ethan while he was in the womb. Now, how in the world do I feel bad about dealing with mental stress of having a special needs child when I have a wife at home who now feels like she's responsible for the fact that he has the issues that he has? And so from a husband's and a father's standpoint, those are the 2 most important roles that I have in life. That takes precedence over the agency, any client that I have, period. And my #1 job was helping her get her headspace right, because it's not her fault, obviously. She didn't control getting sick, and there's no ball valve where you can shut off, the umbilical cord feeding your kid. But it was a real struggle that we went through. And so for probably the better part of that year and a half, on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, we were paying out of pocket. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is not in network. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia was us saying, we're not willing to settle for the status quo that we can get in Tampa. It doesn't matter what the cost is. It doesn't matter what the price is, because price is dollars, cost is time. Cost is everything that you're having to set to the side to go deal with that. And none of it stacks up compared to what's going on with one of your children. And so our lives were put on complete hold for a period of time. We spent well over $100,000 out of pocket to make sure that he was getting the diagnosis that he needed. and everything in between that. But I go into the detail because, number one, let me just be clear, he doesn't have progressive white brain disease. Every birthday he celebrates, we celebrate extra hard because he would have been dead at 10 years old. He turned 13 this year, so that's a blessing in and of itself. But it's just a lot. It's a tough pill to have to swallow, number one, because you wonder why. Why? I think it's a natural thing to say, why me? Why did this happen to us? And I don't think a lot of people have the balls to say stuff like that in public because it's not politically correct. But any human being on the planet that has a child who's born to them with special needs is going to question that at some point. And I don't care who you are. I'm sure you did as well. But, so that's number one, is getting through that piece of it. And that was actually a pretty quick process for us because it really didn't matter. It wasn't going to change anything. Whether I understand why or not didn't really matter. That revealed itself over time. What I can tell you is 13 years down the road, I understand that Ethan was given to us because we were exactly who he needed. And he needed Annie for her brain and her experience in work. And he needed me to go out and fight. And I don't think there's a lot of people out there who are willing to do that. There are a lot. Let me look. We had the elections over, but I'm about ready to get really politically incorrect on my own podcast. And these are my opinions only. Raghav has no idea what I'm getting ready to say. There's a lot of people out there who have kids who have no business having kids because they don't ever plan on sticking around to support them from the beginning. And that's what you see. And that's what you think about when you think about the public school system. I'm here to tell you that if you're in a position to where you're willing to advocate and you're willing to fight, your kid will get the resources because they are there and they're legally required to provide them. And one of the biggest blessings that we've gotten out of all of this was Ethan's one-on-one when he was in elementary school, because he was paired with somebody who probably loved him as closely to being their own is what we would. And she treats him like he's her own child. And I mean, the relationship with the family has just been amazing. She's a personal friend of ours at this point, even though he's moved on. It is in junior high now. Caroline's best friends with her daughter. And at a critical time in our lives, she was put there to be the resource for him, and he would not be anywhere near as far along in life, cognitively or otherwise, if he wouldn't have had that. And I take it back to the fact Annie knew something was wrong. Her experience told her that, and all you have. I'm the dude that you seen the little video on the internet where the guy comes in, he's like, we got to go somewhere, we got to do something you're not going to want to do, whatever. It's Vince Vaughn and Jeremy Renner, and he's like, I don't care who's driving. You know what I mean? I'm the guy that says who's driving. If one of my friends or one of my family has an issue, that's what I bring to the table. I'm going to go fight in the trenches with you. I might even drive, but you can't count on me for much more than that because my skill set's a little bit limited. But when you look back, if you really take the time to think through this stuff, what looks like you were dealt a bad hand actually turns out to be a blessing. And I'm not saying that because I have to mentally convince myself of that. Having a child who relies on you teaches you more about leadership and how to be who you need to be than any book John Maxwell ever wrote, than any mastermind group that exists on the planet. It doesn't matter. Having a child with special needs has made me better, and I'll never be apologetic about that. So I share that because I want people to understand there's a passionate reason that I want to support the Little Sparks Project. I had the money. I know a lot of people didn't. I'm not even going to tell you that I actually had it, but I'm of the mindset that I can sell my way out of anything. I just need to go close another deal. And that's how I've always lived my life. So if I need to raise money, I'll just go prospect harder or call on more people. But there are so many people out there that would be prohibited from even taking that next step because they don't have the financial ability to do that, or they don't have the knowledge to be the advocate. And that's why organizations like what Raghav is putting together are so important for people out there. So I challenge you that if you're a producer listening to this or an agency principal listening to this and you've gone down this road and you've struggled, just know that you've got people you can reach out to and you can talk to. I'm an open book, man. Anytime you need to get in touch with me, if you send me a message, I'm going to call you like that because I know what the struggle's like, and I've lived it. And it's not all the rainbows and unicorns that you see on social media all the time, but you can make it that way and make the best of it if you're willing to try.
I've never heard that story, by the way,
I
and
don't share it.
it is. I mean, it's a touching story. It's amazing to know that about your background, and because you shared it, I will also share the Brooks story that I don't ever tell anybody. Everyone just thinks like, hey, your kid's born with a syndrome, and that was your story, right? Um, we we had no idea. We have one at home already. He was 2 years old at the time. Um, my wife we went to the doctor for a typical ultrasound, and the tech was gone for almost 45 minutes.
Oh,
And we're like, something's wrong. Like my wife said it. She said something's wrong. And ultimately what they said was, hey, like something is going on and you need to go to the hospital right away. You need to have this baby because essentially the sac was tearing away. And it was like, that's not normal. And I don't actually know the verbiage that I'm supposed to use for what actually happened, but something was going wrong. They sent us to the hospital, which is outside of Boston. Um, maybe 8 hours later, 7 hours later, our baby's born. And the first thing I noticed was his hand was cupped. He didn't have any fingers outside of his thumb. And my wife saw it. And I was like, okay, maybe it's something, hey, it happens. Like we can get through this. And then the nurse started crying. And I was like, hey, not the best move. I understand it's an emotional moment. But as soon as she started crying, we were like, something is seriously wrong.
I mean, this is somebody who sees things every single day. Like nurses see a lot of stuff. For them to be moved to the point of tears, I think any normal person would be like,
What happened?
yeah,
Yeah.
what's
And
up?
so
Like,
my wife and I both immediately, so I did not, I always say this story. I didn't cry. He was born. I didn't move because I knew if I did, it would break her. And I was like, I'm smarter than that. Even in this emotional state, I'm smarter than that.
isn't it incredible though, at how clear that thought process is at a time when your brain should be absolute mashed potatoes. Like
100%.
it blows me away. And in no way, I want to be very clear, in no way do I equate these two things to being even remotely similar. So I want to make sure everybody hears that. But I do have like an example of that. And it was when our most recent pet passed away in our kitchen, right? And I tell you this because I'm literally in, like, I have the recording of it. I'm in a Zoom meeting in a coaching call with a killing commercial agency. Annie's calling me on my phone, and I'm like, we don't call each other unless it's an emergency. Like, we have a standing rule. We'll chat back and forth on Messenger. I can leave Facebook Messenger open, and we communicate all day long that way. But if she ever calls me, something's going down. And so I said, if you don't mind, let me take this call real quick. I take it. She's off the charts, man. Just bawling. I can barely understand. Tells me the dog's dead in the middle of the kitchen floor. And I just look at the guys. I'm like, I got to go. Our dog just passed away, and my kids are going to be home from school in like 45 minutes, and they can't walk into this. So, like, this, and I'm a softie, man. Like, I'm really surprised I didn't lose it emotionally. But I mean, I walked back. I got Grayson. I was like, not really any way to candy coat it, man. Tanner passed away. He's laying on the kitchen floor and we need to go home and take care of it. So we went home, and like literally from the second I got the call until we had gotten him out of the house, down to the vet, made all of the arrangements and everything, it was like 35 minutes. And I didn't even have time to even think about what I was going through. And so I say that because as parents, we often wonder how we're going to react in a weird situation. The only other time that ever happened was on Mother's Day. Ethan was down fishing on my in-laws dock, and he went to pull the thing out, pull his line out of the water, and he jerked it too hard, and a fish hook got lodged in the bottom of his the bottom of his neck. Like it went through the skin and out the other side. And my mother-in-law is a retired RN. I'll never forget this. I'm sitting in my in-laws driveway talking to my mom, wishing her a happy Mother's Day because it was our turn to be at Annie's parents. And I see my mother-in-law, like who had 2 hip replacements, like running as but much as you can, down to the dock, and I told my mom, I'm like, something's not right. I just saw Patty running down to the dock. Let me make sure everything's okay. So I open the car door and I hear them screaming my name at the top of my lungs. I'm like, what the heck am I going to go down there? I told my mom, I'm like, I got to go. They're screaming for me. Something's going on. I don't know what happened down at the dock, but it's not that he caught a fish. I can tell. So I run down there, and here he is laying. Annie's got her knees on his wrists so he can't rip at it. Her mom's like sitting on his knees so he can't kick. And I'm like, Patty, like you're the nurse here. Like, what's going on? So I yell up and I'm like, hey, George, I need a pair of needle nose pliers. And he's like, okay. So her father-in-law goes, or her father goes, gets needle nose pliers. And I like go in and dude, I don't even know where I learned this or remembered it from, but I immediately go in and I use the needle nose and I cut right below the eye of the hook. And then because I know that the hook is barbed, I yank it. Now that it's smooth on that end, I pull it all the way through and get the hook out. And stupid Ethan sits up and goes, thanks for saving me, Daddy. Like, that was it. It was over. Once it was out of his neck, it was over. And she takes him. I said, got to get him to urgent care to get a tetanus shot because the hook had some rust on it. I want to make sure there's not any issues there. And the people at urgent care, like, who took the hook out? Like, this is actually really good work. You didn't do any damage or anything. Most people would have tried to yank it from the other way, but isn't it crazy? Like, in the moments of the most stress, when you have to perform, you can just go into that zone. And a lot of the times it's for the exact reason that you said. If you broke, your wife's going to go down with you, and it's not good at that point, man. You have to stay strong.
I think it's like, it all comes from a spot of love. It's like, hey, I love this person so much, I'm going to make sure that they're okay first. And yeah, I mean, like, when the doctor eventually came in and was like, hey, this is bad. We're going to send him to Children's. We're going to send him to a real NICU and figure out what you're going to do. That was, what, 25 minutes after my wife gave birth. She wasn't allowed to leave the hospital. So I went. I followed the ambulance. I could come back and pick her up when the time was right. I get to the NICU. The first doctor, and hey, thank God I never had to talk to him again, but the first doctor said, hey, I'm not sure what this is. I can think it's one of three things based off of the position of his skull and the way he looks and the way he's presenting. And with two of them, he probably won't make it very long. And hey, as a dad, like, hearing that is probably the most painful thing in the world. But also, how do I tell my wife that? And that was the thought, is like, what do I tell my wife? We spent the next 3-4 weeks in the NICU, and it was painful, man. And again, you talked about your wife knowing what to do and her profession. My wife and I don't know anything. My wife's a CPA. I build tech. And so my sister-in-law, who's a nurse practitioner, I called her. I finally got to break. I was bawling, and I lost it. And my wife wasn't there. And I don't think I cried in front of my wife for like a solid 4 weeks until I thought she was okay. Because I was like, I'm not going to do this.
Well, you also run the risk of her like thinking you aren't affected by this at the same level, and you're being insensitive. So there's a balance between how much emotion you're allowed to show versus not showing any. So that, I mean, it's a thing.
It's hard. It is probably the hardest thing. My sister-in-law was a lifesaver. She came up, she did everything for us. I mean, she moved in with us, her husband, their 2 kids, they moved in with us for 9 months. And we always joke, like, I was making a joke at one point. I was like, I wonder how long we actually needed them. And now they live 15 minutes away. There's a lot of days we still need them. And it's not like it goes away. I still need my parents all the time. I still need my sister, my brother, all the people in our life. But about 6 months into this, my wife and I sat down and were like, hey, do you have any idea how much we've spent on parking at the NICU, food at the NICU, travel to the NICU, and all these appointments? Like, do you have any idea? And we looked at it, and in the 6 months from when he was born, we'd spent like $25K. And this year I posted something that we've already spent $16K this year. And so you're talking about $42,000 in 14 months of life. And when we were doing the math, man, it was like, hey, we sold a business. We've done pretty well for ourselves. And this pisses me off. So like, there's people out there that there's no chance they can afford it. And the day we announced this, maybe 48 hours later, we got an application from a family. And we were able to give that family a $10,000 check to help them.
Wow.
When we called them, I cried more than I've ever cried in my life. Then we helped another family, and then we got to help another family. And I was sitting there and I was like, whatever reason, I did say the why me statement. I think every parent does when this happens. And I think it's wrong to say that people didn't say that. Like, you're always going to think that at some point. But the reason became evident quickly. This kid is more loved than anyone in the world. He has every resource at his disposal. We have people coming to our house almost every day to help him sit and move and do all the things he needs to do. He's had 5 surgeries, with my wife and I staying in Boston or staying in the hospital. We don't leave his side. So most people don't have that emotional support. Most people don't have grandparents and aunts and uncles that are willing to spend all this time with you. But most people definitely don't have the money. So if you do have the emotional support, most people don't have the financial. And I don't know many
Dave
people.
Ramsey, man, he'll tell you that the average person doesn't even have $1,000 in a savings account.
Yeah.
No emergency fund. What in the world is going to happen, when a major life event hits you? It's crazy.
And that's the problem. So we started this specifically to say to people, hey, we understand, I've been there. Now you can safely say that 13 years later is the greatest thing that's happened to you, but you've been there emotionally. And now you're saying with us, hey, the emotional support is great and the emotional part is hard. The financial part is arguably bigger at a lot of moments.
Well, and the problem is the
help.
compounding effect of the two is
It's
like
crippling.
it's the death blow, man. Like, so that's one of the reasons why organizations like Little Sparks are so important, because if you can at least relieve some of that financial stress off, that's one less thing that those families have to worry about, because you're making like real decisions at that point, in terms of, maybe we could be a 1-car family. Maybe we should sell the house and move into an apartment. I don't know. I've got 2 kidneys. I only need one. I mean, it's nuts to think about, but like that's the level that you go to, because you can't put your kid back. You can't give them away. You have to figure out how to make it work.
And you can't change them, and nor do you want to.
Now, I'll tell you what, man, we have so much. And again, it's probably a good bit of it is because we openly share a lot on social. We do that intentionally because we want to teach other people it's okay if you have a kid that's different. It's okay to embrace that. And here are some examples of things that we've been able to find out. Like, we did the signing ceremony with the University of Tampa men's basketball team last week, where Ethan signed to be a member of their team. He's got his own locker, his own jersey, like literally goes and shoots baskets with them in practice. They had a massive pizza party and gave him an official document that literally is the same thing that the players sign when they commit to go there. And we did that not because we want to brag about it. We want people to understand that there are programs out there that you may not know about. The only reason that happened is because Andrian found that Team Impact, that's a national organization, was in Florida, and they could find a place for him to be placed with an athletic team that he could, be part of or whatever. And I got to tell you, man, the University of Tampa is top notch. I cannot say enough good things about their head coach, Link Darner, and assistant coach, Justin Pekka, everybody on the staff, all of their players, because they do it right, man. They treat Ethan like absolute gold, to the point he wants to be there every day. And obviously that's not going to happen, but she found that out. She went out, did the research, and realized this is an option. And as a result, he was the first kid from Team Impact placed in a school athletic program anywhere in the Tampa Bay area. So he's like a trailblazer, I guess, for lack of a better term. But we share that stuff to make people aware of it, not because it's, hey, look at me, because I can promise you, I would much rather be posting a picture of my son who plays for the University of Tampa for real than my son who's signed a letter of intent to go over because they're working with kids with special needs. That's just the real side of it.
Now you're spot on. And there really are some amazing organizations out there that support your kids in such amazing ways. But hey, I want to point out that this, for people that go through this, there's no one problem that's harder than the other. And as you can probably attest to, the hardest thing for you is the way you feel about it equates the hardest thing for me, equates to the hardest thing for somebody else. That feeling doesn't change. The level of difficulty of a child is the most painful thing you can go through. Like understanding that you have a child with difficulties is a painful emotional process, and it's hard to overcome. So I think the message of all of this is like, yeah, we're open about it. We're really open about it, but we're open about it because we want people to understand that it's okay to have a tough day. It's okay to be emotional about this stuff. And most importantly, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, hey, I want to talk about this, or even if I need financial help, it's okay to ask for it, because this is not an easy thing to go through.
I was gonna say, I don't even think saying it's okay to do that. You need to do that. Like it's
Agreed.
not even, it's not, oh, if you feel up to it, you should ask. No, you need to seek out emotional support. You need to have a tribe of people around you that are going to help you get through this stuff. It can't just happen on your own. And unfortunately, we were in a situation where, we didn't have a ton of resources on the family end of things at that time to be able to get help with him. And so we had to figure out how to do it on our own for the most part. And I'm okay with that. It's not a big deal. But if you have people that you can count on, don't be afraid to ask them. I think people who don't ask for help are weak. I think it's a sign of strength if you are self-aware enough to know you need help, and then you actually seek out that help to meet whatever the need is. And society might tell you differently, but I don't think that's the case.
I completely agree. And hey, the other thing I want to mention before we wrap anything is you are right. You are helpful in getting the word out, but your wife has been the most helpful, which we did not talk about at all, because Little Sparks supports families more than just the medical complexities and their financial needs. It had the opportunity to partner with your wife's company because of her, and provide assistance on getting the children the devices they need as well. And we've been able to help a couple families with those devices, which has been incredible. But without your wife's intel on how that process works, we were actually missing a massive component to what families really needed. And I did want to touch on that, because you are right. As great as you are, Andrea is a little bit better.
Dude, trust me, man, I'm only good because of her. I'm very, very self-aware of that. I would not be anywhere close to any kind of successful if I wasn't married to her. It reminds me of the story of H.W. Bush riding through Texas with Barbara, and they're in the back of the car that's driving them to wherever they're going to go, and they have to stop for gas. And they get out, and Barbara's like, hey, I know that guy. And it was the guy who was pumping the gas into the car. And so she went out and she actually gave him a hug and talked to him for a few minutes. And, they wrapped up, and she got back in the car, and HW looks at her and says, honey, who was that? And she goes, oh, that was a guy that I dated in high school. And he looked at her and said, oh, so if I would have dated you in high school, I would have been pumping gas for a living? She goes, no, if I would have dated him longer, he would have been president of the United States. That's how I look at it with Annie. So
I couldn't agree more. I think I everyone knows the story. When we started Tarmika, we didn't want to touch our anything in our investment accounts, and my wife emptied out our entire savings account, which was all her money, by the way, and invested in Tarmika. And we were down to pretty much nothing in that savings account. And the ongoing joke in my family still is, she is the one that made the money and not me. And I couldn't agree with that more. The amount of days that she spent with our kids, with Kai, with everything, letting me work till 2 a.m, dealing with me when I was going through those stressful days, keeping me afloat, everything is out there. Same thing with Little Sparks. All of the work that goes into Little Sparks, there's no chance it's me. I reach out to people, we network, we do the things that we're good at, but in reality, she runs the show. And I think that's an important thing to note. The whole the gala's coming up in 6 weeks. She's running the entire thing.
Talk
with
about
a team
that
of
for
support.
yeah.
Team
Talk
of
about that
support.
for
We
a
have
second
6 other
though,
people.
because we haven't even mentioned the gala yet. I mean, I'm sure there's people listening to this that would love to attend if they're able to. I can tell you that Annie and I will be there. So if you want to meet Wonder Woman, you can meet her in the flesh. I'm used to the fact that once people meet her, they no longer have use for me because they realize they could go just directly to the source, and I'm cool with that. But talk about that a little bit because we're really pumped up, man. We booked our flights, we booked our room, and we're going to be there to support you live. And I think a lot of other people would be willing to. What are the specs on the event?
Yeah, so the event is on December 19th in the State Room in Boston at 6 p.m. So it's a really, really nice venue. And the background of this is, my wife and I are matching every ticket sale. We want to grow the network of people that understand what Little Sparks is doing. We want to grow the amount of money that we've raised. But it's on December 19th. And so far, we have over 320 tickets sold. So we have about 100 tickets left to go, and then we're out. And it's turned into a massive insurance event, which is kind of what we expected. People that come in the day before get to hang out at my house and have some drinks. And the people that come day of get to go to an awesome insurance event, raise money for children. We have some great silent auction items. It's black tie, so you get to dress up and look fancy right before the holidays. And it's a great way to give back. You'll have a couple really good speakers. And you'll get to see a lot of people that you see all over social media. We have guys like David. And by the way, I did not invite David directly. I actually invited Annie via email. and David still, he got the +1 invite.
That's right.
But we have a lot of people that you see on social media in the insurance community that jumped on board. And it's because of stories like David's. It's hey, we know people that have gone through something similar and we didn't realize how hard it was. And we want to support this. And so if you can attend the gala, we'd love to have you.
But if you can't, this is where I'm going to put the heat on you a little bit because this thing doesn't fund itself. It requires donations from people who are generous and willing to give of their money if they're not able to also give of their time. And so this is when I reach out to all of you who listen to this, the 50,000 plus downloads we get every single month. I know some of y'all are sitting on deals that I helped you get by giving you a tip or a trick or a gold nugget somewhere, and you need to come off some coin, people. I need you to help me out. If we can't sell the 100 tickets to pack this place out, I would at least ask that if I've helped you in any way, don't do it for me. Don't do it for my wife. Don't do it for Raghav or his wife. Do it for the kids who need an advocate. And I know that you might not think that it has anything to do with you. And I pray that one day it doesn't. But if you can just find it in your heart in any way, shape, or form to give $20, if that's all you have, even though I think you're sandbagging, I need you to come off the wallet. And we're going to share a link in the show notes, and I would ask respectfully that you please consider making a cash contribution to this project. As Raghav said, it's an extremely emotional event when you can help a family who really, really needs the help. And it's not lost on me that he sold Tarmika 2 years ago, and then all of this started happening in his life after. And I would be remiss if I didn't connect the dots and say that while he may think that his purpose was to start a software company, I think him starting that software company revealed his real purpose for the rest of his life. And he can continue to build that. But he's in a point right now where he's been blessed in a way that he can actually deal with the things that are going on in his child's life. And a lot of people aren't. And I know how much money is made off of advice and things that we talk about on this podcast. So please, if you feel motivated, if you don't feel motivated, I need to do a better job of motivating you. But if you feel motivated, we would love to have you there live. I'd love to hug your neck, shake your hand, whatever. But if you can't, please consider making a financial contribution. And, I know that he would greatly appreciate that.
I appreciate that, David. Definitely would appreciate any support we can get. As always, I appreciate you having me on, this time more so than ever before.
Yeah, man, it's been a good conversation. I appreciate you hanging with me for the last little bit, especially on short notice. But I wanted to make sure we got the word out, with enough time left to get rid of the last 100 tickets to the gala, and then also have the Power Producers Army show up in full force. And let's just bury this thing with donations, people. I want I want to see as many success stories come out of this gala as possible, and we can't do it without you. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in this week. Thanks for tuning in every week. We'll catch you next time. See ya.